At 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, one of the world's most advanced airliners suddenly told its pilots they were flying too slowly and too fast at the same time. Seconds later, the autopilot disconnected. In just 3.5 minutes, Air France Flight 447 disappeared into the ocean, taking 228 lives with it. For nearly 2 years, nobody knew why. When investigators finally recovered the wreckage, they uncovered a chain of events that forever changed airline pilot training. This is the story of Air France Flight 447. On the evening of May 31, 2009, Air France Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro for Paris with 216 passengers and 12 crew members. The crossing over the Atlantic was routine. 3 pilots were assigned because the overnight journey exceeded the maximum continuous duty period. As the aircraft settled into cruise at 35,000 feet, the captain left the cockpit for a scheduled rest break, leaving 2 experienced first officers at the controls. Ahead of them stretched the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a vast belt of tropical storms that pilots crossed every day. The weather radar showed scattered cells, but nothing that appeared particularly dangerous. The crew adjusted course slightly to avoid the worst of the weather and continued forward. Everything still appeared completely normal. As Flight 447 entered the clouds, tiny high-altitude ice crystals began blocking all 3 pitot tubes, the sensors responsible for measuring airspeed. Within seconds, the aircraft's airspeed readings became unreliable. Exactly as designed, the autopilot disconnected. The flight computers switched from normal law to alternate law, removing several automatic flight protections that Airbus pilots relied on every day. Suddenly, the crew was manually flying an aircraft over the middle of the Atlantic with confusing and rapidly changing instrument indications. Startled by the unexpected failure, the pilot flying instinctively pulled back on his side stick. The Airbus began climbing. Its speed continued decreasing. The stall warning sounded. Instead of lowering the nose to regain speed, the pilot continued pulling back. The aircraft climbed from 35,000 to nearly 38,000 feet before lift could no longer support it. Air France Flight 447 entered a full aerodynamic stall. By the time the pitot tubes had cleared and the airspeed indications returned to normal, the real danger had already begun. The aircraft was now descending rapidly, but its nose remained unusually high. Because the angle of attack became extreme, the stall warning repeatedly activated, then stopped, then activated again, creating even more confusion inside the cockpit. The captain rushed back from his rest break and asked, "What are you doing?" The response came immediately, "We've lost control of the aircraft." All 3 pilots were now trying to understand an emergency that had developed in less than 2 minutes. The Airbus continued falling toward the Atlantic at over 10,000 feet per minute. Throughout almost the entire descent, the aircraft remained stalled, yet no one fully realized it. As the aircraft descended through lower altitudes, repeated stall warnings, conflicting instrument indications, and overlapping cockpit conversations made the situation even harder to understand. Several times, the nose briefly lowered. Each time, recovery became possible. But almost immediately afterwards, back pressure was applied again, raising the nose and deepening the stall once more. Only seconds before impact did the ground proximity warning system begin shouting, "Pull up, pull up." By then, there was no longer enough altitude to recover. Just 3 minutes and 30 seconds after the autopilot disconnected, Air France Flight 447 struck the Atlantic Ocean. All 228 people on board lost their lives. For nearly 2 years, the aircraft remained hidden beneath nearly 4,000 meters of water before investigators finally located the wreckage and recovered both flight recorders. The investigation concluded that the accident began with something surprisingly small. Temporary icing of the pitot tubes caused unreliable airspeed indications, leading the autopilot to disconnect, exactly as it had been designed to do. But the loss of automation startled the crew. Instead of following the memory procedure for unreliable airspeed and reducing the aircraft's angle of attack, the pilot flying continuously held nose-up inputs that placed the aircraft into a sustained stall. Investigators also found that the crew had received limited practical training from manually handling a high-altitude aerodynamic stall. Air France Flight 447 remains one of aviation's most important lessons, because sometimes an accident isn't caused by a failed engine or severe weather. It begins with something as small as a frozen airspeed sensor and ends when a crew can no longer understand what their aircraft is trying to tell them.
Learn more about aviation safety. Subscribe for more investigation videos.